Hi, everybody. Welcome to our program. This is David Nevins for City Biz, and thank you so much for joining us. And our guest today is Dee Write, and she has a fascinating story to tell. She's, among many other things, she's an author, and she has a new children's book story series out. So, Dee, welcome to our program, first of all.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be with City Biz today.
So, Dee, we're excited as well. And tell us, rather than my telling the viewers, I think it's best coming from you. Tell us a little bit about your inspiring story on your way to becoming an author. And I think it would be an enjoyable tale for our viewers to hear.
Well, I really appreciate that question because I really think that inspiration to become an author or anything creative or otherwise, it starts with education, right, and encouragement in the classroom, as well as at home. And so it's about educators, authors who are writing books, as well as parents. My original inspiration came from teachers and librarians who really encouraged me, to read and to write and express myself creatively. My second grade teacher, Miss Hill, she was the one who got me initially published with my first story, If I Were a Crayon, that I wrote in second grade at Craig Elementary, right? And my mother, she, she framed the booklet that I got published in, as she did all of my my writing and my artwork, as well as, of course, my mother reading to me at home. And then finally, they mentioned authors. Some of my favorite series that I'm sure that other folks have heard of, the Berenstain Bears, the Babysitters Clubs, those series, as well as other books. Those were just, I would flip through. I was definitely a bookworm, so I would flip through the pages sometimes at night. I wasn't up watching TV. I'd be up sort of sneaking and reading more books. And so I would say parents, educators, and other creatives out there. And then finally, when it comes to the inspiration for the stories themselves, it really is inspirations from my own life growing up, as well as those of family and friends. And then, of course, my children. I am a mother of six. We're in a blended family. They provide endless inspiration for stories every day. They are definitely everyday sources for some of the stories that we have in the series.
So fun to hear. And I didn't realize that you had, so we've moved from If I Were a Crayon some years ago. I think you said that was your first book title, to
second
today.
Grade.
Tell us about, so you've launched a book series called Little Ruth, and it's children's books. And your first one, Little Ruth, is experiencing her first day of school, like so many tens of thousands of kids just did. So tell us about Little Ruth, the concept, and tell us about the book, Little Ruth's First Day of School.
I'll start with the book, First Day of School, and then zoom out from there. And so the first day of school is really about little Ruth and her siblings. They're starting school for the first time at a new school. And the parents and the family, perhaps unlike some of us, are completely prepared for everything, except for really being able to be in the school with their kids to help them make friends. That's something that you can't really prepare for, other than giving your kids the self-esteem and confidence that they need. And so in the book, Ruth, she's trying to find some peers to sit with in the lunchroom, ends up sitting with her little brother, which isn't a bad thing, but not what she quite wanted. She had envisioned herself sitting with some of her peers from her own grade. And so she really has to work through that because that was a disappointing experience. And so she gets together with her mother and figures out how to retool. What are you going to do the next day to make friends or to really put yourself out there, and help others to put themselves out there as well? And in the book, as well as in real life, this is inspired by certainly situations I experienced growing up and moving around sometimes due to my mother's career, as well as one of my own children who started at a new school in the middle of the pandemic. She made friends in the book and in real life. I made friends as well as did my daughter in those situations. And so, zooming out a bit, talking about the series, it really is about everyday experiences of children, everyday lived experiences, because we know that with children, they are developing and growing intellectually, emotionally, and socially every day. And so, in the life of a child, everyday development, like making new friends, those are extraordinary moments. It's the extraordinary that happens in the ordinary that makes the series so special. And then one of the things that I would just add is, not only are there social and emotional learnings for children, there's also nuggets and lessons in there for parents about how do you partner with your children, as well as, of course, for those of us who are, avid learners and readers. One of the things that reading does is introduce you to new vocabulary words. And so in every Little Ruth book, including the first day of school, your child will be exposed to new vocabulary words as well.
And that's wonderful. The um, I guess you hope that all kinds of kids see themselves in Little Ruth. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Little Ruth she's an all-American girl. And, when I think about uh, the American stories that we're all living as individuals in the context of families and neighborhoods and communities, um, sometimes it's the case that some of us don't see ourselves represented in that everyday American story or in the American dream that get represented in books or on TV. And so with Little Ruth, I wanted to present a different version of the American protagonist. So we have, yes, an African American little girl, but an everyday little girl with an everyday family, an everyday middle class family that happen to be African American, but that are so similar to other families, no matter the shade, background, ethnicity, whatever. And so I really hope that every child, as well as every caregiver or educator that picks up a Little Ruth book, can see themselves and see their peers and their neighbors inside the pages.
So you probably answered this somewhat, but talk a little bit more about what you hope to accomplish with the Little Ruth series, and where do you see it headed? And let me also say that I think your second book is also about ready to be published, called Backpack Mishap. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. So I think the first thing that I would love to accomplish with Little Ruth is, I talked about diverse representation of the American protagonist, everyday life. We have not only is Little Ruth a diverse representation in her family, a diverse representation of American life and middle class life, but her friends come from every different type of background that you can imagine, and they all have backstories that will come out as well. Um, the second thing that I would love to accomplish with this series, and that is equally important, is it's about fun. It's about making learning and reading and togetherness with your people at your school or with your parent when you're reading a book. It's about making it fun. at the top of our discussion, you asked me about inspiration. The reason that those books and the learning opportunities were inspiring was because I had fun delving into the pages of the books, and so learning should be fun, and that's something that I think we've accomplished with beautiful illustrations and really strong storylines. And then, we talked about those everyday moments in the lives of children becoming extraordinary moments. And so, with Backpack Mishap and other stories in the series, Backpack Mishap, little Ruth, her younger sisters get into her things and mess up her favorite backpack. This is apparently a very special backpack. And she really has to learn, what does it mean to give someone a second chance when they've disappointed you in some way. And that's certainly a strong social and emotional developmental skill for kids, but also something they can relate to, right? Your little sister got into your things. I was a little sister. I'm the youngest, and I certainly got into my brother's things. And then one more book, Halloween Drama Queen, talks about, that'll be coming out. We're releasing the title this fall because we have a little bit of competition going on to design Little Ruth's costume. So watch social media for that. But in 2024, we'll be releasing that book. And it's really about, the lesson in there is about, how do you come up with creative solutions when things don't go quite the way you want? In this case, little Ruth wants an expensive costume, and her parents are like, it's not even about the affordability in this case. It's about the principle of the matter. You want $100 costume that you're going to wear for one night and not be thinking about next year, right? So how does little Ruth work through those types of things? So those are the types of those are the primary goals: is representation, having fun learning, and then really elevating those everyday experiences in the lives of children that are truly extraordinary in their development.
Tell us, Dee, a little bit about what you hope might be next for the Little Ruth brand, and how our viewers can learn more and follow along with you.
Well, I have the world of dreams for a little Ruth. We are in the process, actually, of developing some jewelry, a bracelet with charms that are self affirmation, and you'll see those charms and that special bracelet represented in the first day of school and other books. And so, jewelry, apparel, if I could dream for a moment, I could see a little animated series, but we're not there yet. And then, in terms of how you find us, you can find us on all of the major social media outlets: Instagram, Facebook. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but at Little Ruth Books, and that's books with an S, is the handle on our social media channels. You can also find me on social media channels at author Dee Write, and that's WRITE on Instagram, as well as on Facebook. And then finally, you can check out our website. That is littleruth.com. That's LITTLERUTH.com. You can check out our books there. You can also check out some articles that we have written to help parents and others along the way as they collaborate with children on those everyday extraordinary moments. And then finally, you can find us on Amazon. Just put in Little Ruth First Day of School for this particular book, and we'll come right up.
I have no doubt many of our viewers will do that. Let me just ask you in closing. I know you have particular interest in this and in promoting it through your series, diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. Talk a little bit again, a little more about what you hope to accomplish with the series, and kind of what do you want little kids to get out of reading the books, and maybe share also. I was just thinking, I hadn't asked you this, sort of the age range that you feel you're appealing to.
Sure. So I will take up the age range because I think that's a pretty quick matter. And then we'll get to the rest of your question, which I really appreciate. So in terms of the age range, it is 3 years old to 8 years old is when you think about educators, and trying to figure out what's going on with a child. At 3 years old, you're probably having someone read to you, but you're picking up on sort of more complex issues in terms of social and emotional development. But as a child reaches the age of 7 or 8, you're probably reading on your own, and sometimes it's easier to pick up a picture book rather than sort of a short chapter book, to kind of aid with that process. So that's why we say 3 to 8. But what I will say is, I started reading to all of my kids when they were a baby. And so I would say we could go as young as just a few months old, right? Because the love for reading and language starts really, really young. And I think pediatricians would tell you that, well, that's certainly what my pediatricians told me. So now when we sort of come back to the issue of diversity and equity and inclusion, which I know have become sort of interesting words and phrases depending on sort of your perspective these days. But what it's really about is it's about inclusion and ultimately belonging, right? People want to belong. And the way we help people to feel like they belong and that they're included, is to really have authentic representation. So often we find extremes being represented, for different groups, whatever it is, racial, ethnic, whatever the diversity is that we're talking about. We have the 20% sort of out there as a representation of the 80%. And I think that's certainly the 20% are a part of the narrative, but the 80% are also important. And so what we know, for example, that the majority of African American families, I'll use African Americans because Little Ruth's family is African American. The majority of African Americans are middle class. There are varying levels within middle class, and I won't get into a sociological sort of lecture here. But that's often not what we see depicted in the news and on
Right,
television. And so authentic representation is important. And when I talk about inclusion and belonging, it's one of the things that I think stems from authentic representation. And it's really that understanding that once we kind of get that authentic representation out there, what are the values that folks have, right? You want to you want to contribute to your community. You want your kids to have a great life, and you want to do more than the people before you, your parents and your grandparents. Those are values that we all have in common. And if we can get to that authentic representation that represents the 80% of us, not to the exclusion of the 20%, but really couch some of our stories and narrative in the 80%, I think we'll see what I know that so many Americans already know, is that we have more in common than that separates us. And I would say that is, when I think about one of the goals, one of the most important goals of this series, it really is underscoring, bolding, and highlighting that we have more in common that unites us than what separates us. And that's the American way. And that is why I've told this, what I think is a beautiful story and a beautiful series about an all-American girl with an all-American family and an all-American community.
Dee, it sounds like there's a lot that you and little Ruth can teach us in that regard. So listen, your background there is beautiful, but I'm going to ask, bring the book, grab the book over your shoulder, bring it a little closer to the screen, if you would. And
hopefully it's not too shiny. Let me
okay.
let me just take off the book jacket.
Okay.
Which that way you can see the cover
There's
here.
little Ruth's first day of school. The next one is backpack mishap. And so, listen, this wasn't, you might not have been expecting this, but yet you have a favorite page or two in the book you want to read for us?
Oh, actually, I do have a couple of favorite pages. And so Well, first, I want to say that this first page is the dedication to my late husband, Frank, who is the inspiration for the dad in this. And when we talk about authentic representation of fathers of all Black backgrounds, including Black fathers, one of the things that we do is represent that well, I think. And then I am going to just pick up on another, if you can allow, if you can indulge me for 2 pages or so. Now I
No
can't see
worries.
myself, if you can see that. One of the things that we talk about is self-affirmations. And so I'm going to just sort of scroll the book across here
Mm-hmm.
for you. In this particular page, little Ruth is using those charms that I talked about with the bracelet. They're called Adinkra charms, and we'll teach more. We teach more about that in the back of the book as well as on our webpage. She uses these as things that she can glance down at when she's feeling nervous or apprehensive or just needs a source of inspiration. It's a way that she grounds herself. And then you'll see here, little Ruth has a bonnet on. Now, any of you who watched some of the ABC shows, How to Get Away with Murder, which is weird for an author to talk about, but you'll notice that there's a bonnet, right? And one of the things that is, it seems silly, but does lend itself to authentic representation is most many Black girls, when we go to bed, we wear bonnets on our heads, and so that's one of those little tells when you can know that there's authentic representation. And then finally, if I could just pick one more little page, this is after Ruth. This is after Ruth sort of, has met with her mom and sort of is trying to figure out how to make some new friends. And in these pages, you see again that diverse representation of other youth. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I mean. Every single person, we tried to represent every single person. It's hard to do it in one book at a time, but over the course of the series, not only will you see more representation, different types of diversity, not just racial and ethnic, but also you'll see those backstories of those characters, that authentic representation that I keep referring back to. You'll see those over the course of the series through the characters that are friends of Little Ruth.
And I have no doubt that we will. Dee Write, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And this is David Nevins for City Biz. And please check out the Little Ruth children's book series. I think you'll enjoy it. Your children will enjoy it. Your grandchildren will enjoy it. Maybe we'll all learn something along the way. Thank you for joining us today.